Hello, Molweni, Sanu, Hujambo, I'm Tembekile Mkhototo. Welcome to another edition of Unwrap Africa here on SABC News. Every Sunday night, we focus on the latest news, trends, and successes of the African continent. Siyaqaqa. Well, coming up tonight, millions of Sudanese are fleeing the country, turning an urgent escape from violence into long-term exile. Then later, today is International Women's Day, and we're going to speak to Moleboheng Ramoreboli, Managing Director of Mehloding Investment and Business Consultants, about the successes and indeed the challenges that businesswomen still face on the continent in 2026. All of that and much more coming up in the next half hour. And in fact, tonight we want your thoughts on International Women's Day. Do you think that women leaders on the continent have done enough to advance Africa in their leadership roles? We'll take your thoughts on multiple platforms. On Facebook, we're SABC Unwrap Africa, while on X, we are at SABC News_TV. And here's a look at the main stories from the continent this week. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says his government has no intention of invading or attacking others as he pushes for access to a seaport, an ambition that is stirring fresh tensions in the Horn of Africa. Abiy's remarks come amid growing concern about his vision of restoring Ethiopia's sovereign access to the Red Sea, particularly through the Eritrean port of Assab. Guinea's President Mamadi Doumbouya has returned to the country following a 3-week absence that had raised questions about his health. President Doumbouya left Guinea in February to attend the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa and had not been seen since. Officials from the World Food Programme say that aid deliveries to Gaza, Sudan and other global hotspots are slowing to a crawl amid widespread disruptions from the new escalating Middle East war. The conflict has crippled vital air, sea and land supply routes. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi says the war in the Middle East has pushed his country to an economic state of near emergency. That's an economic state of near emergency. The conflict between the US, Israel and Iran has seen strikes on Egypt's Gulf allies and paralyzed trade through the Strait of Hormuz. The Amani Festival in the DRC has been moved from the city of Goma to Lubumbashi due to insecurity. The festival has come to define Goma's cultural scene. Lubumbashi, meanwhile, will now host the gathering from the 10th to the 12th of April. Let's take a closer look at the situation in Sudan tonight, because the war in that country is no longer just a national tragedy. Nearly 3 years after fighting erupted in 2023, the conflict is reshaping migration across Africa. Millions of Sudanese have fled their homes, crossing into neighboring countries including Chad, South Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the Central African Republic. What began as an urgent escape from violence is now urgently, or increasingly in fact, turning into more longer-term exile. Naba Muhyiddin has our report from Port Sudan.
Across Sudan's borders, the scale of displacement is transforming entire communities. Families who fled for safety are now confronting the reality that returning home may not happen soon. For thousands, the journey itself was dangerous and uncertain, but reaching safety has not ended the struggle.
I have fled multiple times and returned to Sudan and was displaced again in the Red Sea state. I lost my husband in the war, and now I'm raising 8 children alone despite the poor conditions here. But I can't return home until the guns are entirely silenced.
Her story reflects the experience of millions of Sudanese uprooted by the conflict. According to United Nations estimates, Sudan now facing one of the largest displacement crises in Africa. Millions have crossed international borders, while many more remain displaced inside the country. Neighboring countries, many already under economic strain, are now absorbing large numbers of refugees. Schools, health services, and food supplies are under pressure as authorities try to support rapidly growing communities. But the prolonged movement of people is also changing regional dynamics.
The continued movement of Sudanese civilians is beginning to reshape labour markets, informal economies and political debates across parts of the region. At the same time, the war's creating a new demographic reality inside Sudan itself. In areas such as Darfur, displacement and violence have led to the replacement of some African communities by Arab tribal groups. These shifts illustrate how the conflict's displacement crisis is sending shockwaves far beyond immediate humanitarian needs. If the war continues, these demographic changes could have some of the most lasting and profound impacts on Sudanese society.
Aid agencies say the crisis now goes beyond emergency relief. With no clear timeline for people to return home, governments and humanitarian groups are being forced to consider long-term solutions for housing, education, and jobs. Without sustained international support, humanitarian officials warn pressure on host communities could grow, raising the risk of economic strain and social tensions in already fragile areas. With the conflict in Sudan showing little sign of a resolution, its ripple effects are spreading far beyond the country's borders. What began as a flight from violence is evolving into a regional migration shift, one that is redrawing Africa's displacement map in real time. Neba Muhiddin for Unwrap Africa, Port Sudan.
In Zimbabwe, the country's constitutional amendment bill is still dividing opinion among politicians and civil society. The bill has also triggered a tense political atmosphere in the country, with incidents of intimidation as well as political violence re-emerging in Zimbabwe. Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, among other provisions, proposes extending presidential and parliamentary term limits from 5 to 7 years.
That resolution is binding on all of us, right from the president throughout all the structures of the party. That is why resolution number 1 of the conference has succeeded, because it binds everyone. If you don't agree with what has been decided by the party, you are allowed to disagree. But we have to disagree loyally.
Civic society and opposition political parties have accused the ruling party of creating an uneven playing field. They have sent out an outcry as signs of repression and intimidation have resurfaced. Constitutional lawyer Tendai Biti was barred by the police from publicly launching his Constitution Defenders Forum and was forced to hold the launch inside an office.
This constitution celebrates that we're all equal and we're all accountable to each other. This constitution celebrates the values that bound us. This constitution celebrates a vision that we have for our country. And that vision is a peaceful, just, democratic, transparent, devolved, green Zimbabwe. That is the mission, that is the vision we have. This constitution celebrates a vision and a mission. This constitution celebrates objects. What are the objectives of the CDF? The objectives are that we will defend the 2013 constitution as it stood in its original form.
Opposition parties have also accused President Mnangagwa's government of cracking down on opponents to the constitutional change.
If you are opposing the bill, you should not say out anything. But if you are in support of the bill, then you can say something. What worries us, and we have got information to that effect, Parliament has published a purported invitation to members of the public to send emails to a given email. They've also said you can submit something physically at the Parliament building. Now, what they are going to be doing, each document that is submitted. If you say something that they don't want, they'll follow you up, and you'll be beaten up or followed secretly. So you look at that. What kind of debate is that?
Our country, ladies and gentlemen, is sliding into more and more intolerance. While ZANU-PF right now is busy campaigning and holding its meetings, other political parties are not being allowed to hold their meetings. This signifies that our country is sliding back to the anarchy that characterized this land in 2008. We are going to see more and more violence, especially as we go deeper and deeper into the discussions of the 2030 agenda.
Zimbabwe's parliament has invited the public to submit their written views on the proposed Constitution of Zimbabwe amendment. The invitation is part of a prescribed 90-day public consultation period from the date of gazetting. The process is intended to allow citizens to participate in public hearings before Parliament commences its deliberations on the proposed constitutional changes before the bill is passed into law.
Let's take you back to our question of the day, and we've been asking you on International Women's Day if you think women leaders from the African continent have done enough to advance Africa in their leadership roles. Let's have a look at what you've been saying. Kolani Mamgeli says there's no identifiable role that can be enumerated. They're still playing a second fiddle role to their male counterparts, and that is due to a system that works against them, as some experts have said over the years. One here from Spelele Dlangamandla, who says that gender alone has not guaranteed transformative leadership. The real issue has mostly been systems, governance, quality and political culture, not whether the leader is a man or a woman. What Africa needs is not simply more women leaders, but better governance, stronger institutions and accountability, regardless of gender. Fumulubosa Masipi says, I don't know why the media are making it a big deal, as if it's impossible in Africa to elect or appoint a woman for president. Africa is the first place where women were taking a lead. We've got warrior women, powerful queens and prophetess as women. Here's one here that says, I believe in leadership that is driven by competence, not gender. Development and forward thinking is accomplished on competence. Africans should not fall for the gender campaign that is pushed by the West. We want people who can do the job. We don't care what gender they are. One last one here, I think. Big win for Ghana and for women in leadership. Congratulations to COP Lydia Donko flying the flag high on the global stage. More women breaking barriers like this is exactly what we need. Well, this is Unwrap Africa. We continue our focus on International Women's Day when we return. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with Unwrap Africa. Today is International Women's Day. The day honors the achievements of women and promotes women's rights. The UN's theme for this year's International Women's Day is Rights, Justice, Action for All Women and Girls. Well, tonight on Unwrap Africa, we're going to talk about the successes and issues that are still plaguing women in the business space, especially with Moleboheng Ramoreboli, Managing Director of Mehloding Investment and Business Consultants. Good to have you on Unwrap Africa, and a very happy International Women's Day to you, ma'am. So let's start first with the background of your journey as a professional and ultimately to where you are now with Mehloding Investments and Business Consultants, and what exactly it is that you do.
Okay. My journey really starts in the Lesotho's education area, and my mother's example. And then I went to university in Canada, where I was exposed to like the kind of contribution that going into business can do to an economy, as well as uplifting of the population as a whole. So, and I was lucky enough to work in World Bank projects in Lesotho Zanzibar, Namibia, and then working in Johannesburg in economic development. So that helped me to identify opportunities that we are not taking as local people or as African people to participate in businesses.
And how would you say that that experience in particular has shaped you as a leader in the space that you're in, growing up or being educated primarily in Lesotho, going on to study in Canada, and then being also able to work in South Africa, which is also a different environment from those two countries?
Yes, like, like in Lesotho, like the background of my mother, managing agribusiness in order to, because my father was in politics, so she was the breadwinner basically. So when I studied in Lesotho, I studied, the sciences. But when I went to university, I did project financing. That is what exposed me to the business opportunities rather than government jobs. And I worked in Lesotho on World Bank project. It was funded by the World Bank, but it was a Lesotho National Development Corporation position, where I literally participated in attracting productive investment into Lesotho and creating a productive economy that was able to export. For the first time, Lesotho was able to export products internationally.
And was it an easy climb for you up the ladder?
No, it was not an easy climb, but the environment in Lesotho, like small as it is, it gives you the responsibility, and you feel that you have to jump and make a contribution, and you're given all the resources to do so, and you're supported by highly educated and productive people, innovative people. So it was not difficult, but it was very challenging. Like, you'd be sent to Japan and convince a Japanese investor to invest 10 million into Lesotho, and he's never seen Lesotho before. He knows nothing about it. So you have to be very, very innovative and aggressive.
And Mr. Ramoreboli, from the challenges that you experienced then, how many of those would you say are perhaps unique to women specifically, and how much of it was just to do with the general attitude that people, especially in the West and other spheres of the world, have towards Africa?
Okay, like in Lesotho is very unique in that, the leadership in government and as well as in business is driven by women, because most women go to school while the boys used to traditionally work in the mines before they can, assert themselves. So in Lesotho, women are at the forefront of pushing development as well as businesses. So it was not difficult for me to get involved like that. And you're given all the opportunities in the world to assert yourself. And internationally, they hear about Lesotho very vaguely, but they see us, as women, challenging and conquering and participating in World Bank events, Commonwealth events, asserting ourselves. So that is what brought Lesotho into an industrialization phase.
And do you think it surprises people? I'm listening to your story. Do you think it surprises people when you tell the story about the fact that being from Lesotho, from the African continent, ultimately, that there was a general acceptance, and women who for years, for decades, had ultimately been industrious and had been leading, because there are misconceptions about when exactly women on this continent began to lead, began to make, to bring the bread home, if you will.
Yes, like, a lot of, when you participate in that space, you find a lot of African women in big businesses. For instance, in Kenya, there was a woman who was exporting roses to Japan. Every morning she was loading roses to Japan. Women in Africa own big businesses like in the coffee plantations, they're not just doing menial businesses. And even here in South Africa, you do find women like in mining and all these industries. The only industry that we are not fully participating in is the financial services. And that is a holdback for us because the banks are owned by conglomerates and they don't help us to meet our aspirations and potential.
And is that by design?
Yes, it is by design because like the South African banks specifically, they don't finance black business. They don't finance black people. Actually, they redline areas that are predominantly black owned or residences that are owned by Africans. And they have a 3-tier interest rate where the black businesses and blacks are charged the highest interest. And therefore, it is an inspiration for us, especially as African women, to go into the financial services sector. We should be establishing banks and financing instruments, so that we can drive the economy of the country.
Thank you so much for your time, ma'am. Moleboheng Ramoreboli speaking to us, Managing Director of Mehloding Investment and Business Consultants, joining us on Unwrap Africa. Welcome back. Unwrap Africa producer Nonhlanhla Mthembu has this week been catching up with entrepreneur Mavis Anim Mensah. Their discussion centered around Independence Day in Ghana, but also today's big event, which is International Women's Day. Have a listen to their reflections.
It is Ghana Independence Day. What does that mean to you?
It's the 69th Independence Day of Ghana, and as we all know, Ghana has been a beacon of hope for most of the African country. Ghana has actually, established itself as a stable economy and also politically. And I can say it's one of the safest places in Africa to be in. We've invited various Ghanaian community, Ghanaian professionals, and also friends of Ghana to celebrate the occasion today. We have various cuisines that will be also having. There will be also some traditional drumming that will be going on. So it's also some cultural exposés for people to feel Ghana and celebrate the 69th Independence Day. The symbol of hope has always been the first president of Ghana that had paved the way, has always been Dr. Kwame Nkrumah that brought independence to Ghana, and also it has reflected Ghana as a peaceful and very accommodative kind of a country.
Who's that particular woman who stands out when you're thinking International Women's Day?
I would say Winnie Madikizela Mandela is one strong woman, I would say, that really pops out in my mind in terms of Africa. She's an epitome of hope and courage, very strong and vocal woman, and she's not afraid to talk. And I think, most of African women, I think because of the way, the culture and how we grew up, women are not able to voice out what they feel or what they want to portray in an environment that can be very harsh. So I see Winnie Mandela as a very strong person that young women can look up to.
And that conversation brings us to the end of tonight's edition of Unwrap Africa here on SABC News. We're back with you next Sunday at 8 p.m. Until then, take care and stay with SABC News. Bye-bye.